Hello, my name is Paul Orselli. I'm president and chief instigator of POW, Paul Orselli Workshop, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Holly Truitt and Bill Swaney. Hi, Bill and Holly, how are you?
We're great, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
We're so
good.
excited to be on POW.
Well, hopefully you'll say that at the end too, but we'll see how it goes. So we're going to talk about a number of things, but the thing that gets us started in the conversation is this called the Indigideck, which I have, as you can see, a copy of here. So I wanted to have an opportunity to chat with Holly and Bill about Indigideck and related topics. So, but before we start that, I always like to get a little bit about people's backgrounds. So maybe if you each could tell us just a little bit about your background and how you came to work together. And so Holly, why don't you start, and then we'll have Bill check you out and see if the story's still the same.
I love it. So Holly Truitt, and let's see, I am the CEO of Holly Truitt Consulting, very unique name. And it works. It goes by HTC because the rest of our design team was tired of saying that long name. And we really work in this space of helping institutions, businesses, museums, venture-funded groups unlock social impact. And so we parachute in, ripcord out, work in whatever challenge they're working on, helping them co-create generally. So bringing diverse ideas around the table. And we really love to bring unexpected voices to the table, or those that have historically not been at the table, to do solution finding. In addition to that, I teach sometimes at the Stanford D School, which is their design school, and I'm mother to a sweet boy named Finn, who is actually at home, and so may make a cameo, like little appearance at some point.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out. and Bill, how about you? What's your background a little bit?
Hi, Bill Swaney here. I am a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes of Western Montana. I presently live, however, on the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation in Western North Dakota. And I met Holly some 8+ years ago when I was the director of tribal education for my tribe in Montana, and we collaborated on some work there, and we've just kind of grown from there to where what Holly has described today is she's kind of struck out on her own venture from where she was when I first met her, and she's kind of pulled me along for the ride, but she continually refers to me as the Fred to her Ginger, so I guess I'm supposed to be leading.
Well, and
I lead wherever she tells me to go.
Ginger did everything with Fred backwards and wearing high heels, so that's
right.
That's a big accomplishment. So
right.
Well, welcome to you both. And like I said, today we're going to talk about the collaboration of the Indigideck. And so let's start out with the basics. What is the Indigideck?
Bill, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take the first run?
I'll go ahead and start, and then you can correct everything that I say. How does that sound?
I'll just ginger. I'm just gonna ginger.
Yes. It's a little bit of background, Paul. I think first of all, in the work that we do, Holly and I working together, the work that we do has primarily involved the meaningful inclusion of tribal communities into design work, whether it be some kind of a proposal, some kind of project, some kind of undertaking, where I think in the current social situation, for a lot of reasons, we're starting to see a lot of interest in authentic representation of Native people. And I came from a particular background of, I had formerly taught at a tribal college, for example, and prior to that, I did environmental protection work, and there were always people coming to me and saying things like, what do Native people think about this? Native Americans, American Indians, Natives, whatever we want to call them. What do they think about this? Or worse, it was, we have a grant idea and we already wrote it, and just sign here. Just sign here. And we're going to give you a little bit of money, and we're going to have $3 million. So the idea behind it was also not just, so the idea of meaningful inclusion means early and often and substantive and considered and authentic. So the question becomes, okay, so we'll say it's very chic. It's very chic now to do the reservation dogs, the dark winds type of approach, which has been very popular, not just with Native people, but with really a lot of people, I think, in kind of just in the mainstream culture. So how do you go about doing that? So it was really kind of the typical Holly Truitt magic, because I don't know, we were talking one day, and next thing I know, we had an Indigideck, and I didn't even know we were doing that.
Wow. So so then let's swing it over to Holly. Then from the ginger side of the equation, what is it? What is the Indigideck? How did it come about, Holly?
It's so often Bill and I get called or invited into spaces to help museums, libraries, Fortune 500s, like think about how might I build relationships that are authentic with Indigenous people? How might I invite them to the solution table? What might I not say? Like, where am I going to mess up? Like, right? And so,
good question.
Yes, exactly. And where do I start in this? And then once that journey begins, how do I sustain, and how do I show up as a good partner? And how do we design the richest, most beneficial solutions? And I think through that process, it really, for Bill and I, we just kept circling around this idea that non-tribal institutions need support in being able to authentically collaborate and co-create. And I, as some people know, am a huge fan of cards. I think like making technical or big ideas into bite-sized pieces. And I'm also, as a designer, really interested in process, particularly co-creation and solution finding. So we just began, or maybe I began, Bill, I felt like we were on the dance floor together, but it may be that I just began to
maybe Ginger actually led this dance.
Ginger may have led. It began with really beginning to pull things together to write a more academic article, and a dear friend just said, no one's going to read that, Holly. Like, you guys do such amazing work, and how do you get it into everyone's hands? And I have worked on designing cards for community co-creation, designing your life, and it suddenly clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to think about how building like all that co-creative and collective impact and collaboration work, just one card at a time, in developing Indigidesign. The idea really behind Indigidesign is it's that intersection of design justice, co-creation, and community. And then in that sweet spot, a lot of great things can happen. And so our design process really was starting at the beginning, the assumption that you may not even know whose ancestral lands you're on. and arcing all the way to the idea that you may build incredible relationships, you may find a shared vision of change, you may do really promising work in making change together, and you have someone making an appearance.
I know. I was going to say my dog Shiloh is interested in the Indigideck, but hopefully he'll take a rest.
And then the last phase is that we actually have put into it the idea of scaling. How do you jump to the next big thing together?
Awesome. So so here is this deck, which I guess I'm a beta tester. I'm a prototype tester. Thank you very much. And so Bill, so who is the deck for? Like who do you and Holly envision using this deck and how?
Really what it comes down to is this deck is a blueprint, a roadmap for how to build a relationship and how to build a meaningful relationship with a tribal community, a tribal government, tribal individuals, as far as working towards ideas that an organization may want to accomplish. We want to build an exhibit that recognizes your historical occupation of this land or whatever it might be. Now, the deck in and of itself, I hand you this deck, Paul, it doesn't instantly give you what I would call res cred. I have the Indigideck people work with me. That it's a roadmap to how to get there, how to work towards the concepts that are outlined in the deck. And a lot of that is relationship building. A huge amount of it in tribal communities is relationship building. There can be significant mistrust of outsiders. There can be significant concerns about things like cultural appropriation and exploitation of cultural knowledge, indigenous cultural property rights, all those kinds of things. Tribes today can be very, very sophisticated about that. They can talk about things like institutional review boards and protection of their own intellectual cultural property rights and rights and data and all those kinds of things. And we've tried to be mindful of that just in the workings that we've done and the experiences that I've had and that Holly's had as we've worked together about where are the pitfalls and how to identify those things ahead of time, those potential landmine issues ahead of time, and steps to take towards building that relationship in such a way that you can minimize the headache and you can minimize the concern and reassure a tribal community again over time that you're sincere and forthright in your efforts and that you are about what you say you're about and you're going to do what you say you're going to do, nothing more, nothing less. And I think those are some of the concepts that are in the Indigideck that are outlined as far as how to go about doing this. But it takes work on the part of the person holding that deck in their hand.
Sure.
Yes.
So super. Yeah, I think I'm sure when you're working with any sort of co-creation or community building, those issues of trust and communication, obviously always in the forefront, or they should be. So Holly, let's talk a little bit about nuts and bolts. My esteemed D-School friend, what kinds of things might someone expect to see? Like I see there are different types of cards like Sparks and Our Story and Tips. So what are some of the nuts and bolts of the cards? What kinds of things, what kinds of tools are there to help people dig into these sort of relationships?
Well, we really wanted to make the deck a joy and feel accessible. And so as we played with different iterations, what stood out is just telling the story of Bill and my journey might be really helpful in being able to demonstrate what that might look like and the speed in which it can happen. That it just, you can only go as deep as the trust that's there and the connection. And so
working at the speed of trust.
Yes, the speed of trust. So at the in the deck, there's that arc, and in between the story are really sort of the mindsets that underpinned that moment in our evolution of building relationships, of understanding each other better, of me learning about Bill's culture. And there's also really practical tips like bring food. Ask each other about that. You're right? So bring food, ask each other about each other's personal connections, the things that we care about. And then in addition to that are like different sparks. So somewhat like case studies that allow somebody in a single card to see like, oh, that's what that might look like. And so we do the whole arc of the co-creation, the Indigidesign process with those kinds of pieces interspersed. And we're getting really good feedback on it. We also are really finding that the case studies are powerful, that the combination of design prompts, mindsets, tips, story. So that is one area that we're working on more. And I should put a shout out. Indigideck is possible because of the National Institute of Health SEPA funding that we have through the city of Missoula.
Always thank your funders.
Yes, thank you, Tony. So we're really blessed to have funding to help create the Indigideck, and it means that this winter I'll be doing some listening with different museums and individuals who we did our first connections with that created sparks about what are some of the barriers, where are the places that people are afraid, where are the opportunities that they're seeing. So I'll do follow-up interviews with them, and my hope is that maybe there'll be some more applied case studies from beyond our work that we can begin to integrate in as well. So it's living and evolving in real time.
A work in progress, as they say. That's great.
Yes.
Well, one thing I know from being able to go through and look at the Indigideck myself is that having those case studies and sparks and the background about you and Bill, I think that's a nice way to get people into the process, since not everybody necessarily starts the process or works the process in the same way. So I think having those different places where people can hook into the process, that's a nice part of the Indigideck. I had a sidebar question in the spirit of learning and I asked you a little bit before we were recording, but as somebody who might have an opportunity, or people watching the video having an opportunity to work with different folks, I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about terminology. You know, there are lots of like Native American Heritage Month and Indigenous people, and I know Indians is like an old school term, and maybe some people don't like that. So if you wouldn't mind, it would be helpful for me, and I think some people watching the video, just to hear both of your takes on terminology when you're working with people.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, it's one that demonstrates, I think, already a cultural sensitivity type of mindset. What I would say, speaking for all 572 federally recognized tribes, I like to put it.
Aren't we lucky that you can talk about for all of them?
Yes, I'm going to speak for all of them right now. Just ask. That's all you have to do, is to say, given that there are a number of terms out there to refer to Native people, is kind of how I shorthand it. Do you have a preference? Would it be all right with you? I have typically used Native American or American Indian, for example. I mean, we have the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. We have Native American Heritage Awareness Month or whatever. all those kinds of things. So it's always in good taste to just ask, what is there, how would you like us to refer to you? You know, here it might be not uncommon to hear somebody say, I prefer for you to refer to us as the MHA Nation, the Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation, or whatever it might be a tribally specific reference that they might want. If you're working with an individual, with a particular tribe on a particular project, if you're working with a group of tribes, it's always appropriate to just ask. That's not in poor taste at all.
Great. Holly, do you want to add anything?
Well, I love Bill, just as someone who's not tribal. I love that you've taught me to just ask and to not be shy about it. And I'm thinking of a specific time that we were going to tribal council to present about a opportunity for a proposal, and part of the Indigideck process, right? Like you don't start projects without the nation approving the project. And so Bill had invited me to join and to present on the proposal with him. And I called him mid-drive because I said, and you probably remember this, Bill, do I say reservation or do I not say reservation? And he was like, what else would you call it? And it was this moment of like, right? And it was also this moment of like, oh, this is it. Like for Bill and I to make impact together, I have to show up like a little raggedy and maybe a little unclear. And Bill, you're such a great collaborator, and you just meet me in that space and make it fun and also give me dignity, like, right? And not knowing. So I'm really grateful for that. And I love your observation of like, just ask.
Yeah, that's probably a good policy in lots of situations, to just ask people about the way they want to be addressed, or the things that are important to them. Awesome. Well, now I'm sure there will be people watching this video who are like, okay, this sounds great. Like this sounds like something that can be helpful to me, and I'm interested in this kind of work, and I have existing partnerships or want to foster new partnerships. So how can people find out more about the Indigideck and the work of you both, Holly and Bill? I always like to say when I'm doing these videos, since we're on YouTube, we'll make sure to put links and references in the description below. So of course we can give references and information about both Bill and Holly's work, and but also what specifically about the Indigideck.
Bill, do you want to lead, or do you want me to lead on how people find their?
You're taking the lead on this one, Ginger.
I think this is yours, Holly. So
I love it. All right, Ginger. Okay, so you can go to Holly Truitt Consulting, to our portfolio page, and there's a link to the Indigideck. And it's in, like I shared, it's a prototype, it's in its beta testing, it's evolving and changing very regularly. So you can go and get a free virtual copy of it. In addition, we're working on, and we're not quite there, but we'll make sure to include it on the website when we are, that you'll be able to do and to order at no markup, just the direct cost. You can order a deck that would be shipped to your house from a on-demand print shop, and we're just working through the logistics of that.
awesome. So
yeah.
people are getting in on the ground floor, as they say. This awesome, and I'm sure you both will be interested as more and more people find out and use the Indigideck. I'm sure their comments or suggestions are of interest to you in the spirit of constantly evolving. That's great. So thank you both very much. I think this is good timing, since we're in Native American Heritage Month when we're recording this. But I think always in our business looking for tools that help us to be better creative partners with the communities we work with and serve is always a welcome thing. So I don't know, I always like to, I'm a little hesitant with you two, but I'll still give you the opportunity if there's any parting thoughts or parting words, something we didn't touch on before we sign off. Bill, you want to get us started, and Holly finish us up?
Absolutely, Paul. One of the things that we had talked about was this deck was designed to work in tribal communities, but it is also a useful tool for really any kind of community work where the community may be poor, may be underserved, may be marginalized in some way, low economic status, unique situation, whatever it may be. So this is designed for work in tribal communities, but the overall blueprint we felt like would be useful in a lot of scenarios. And it is, it has gone literally around the world to some folks, but it is by its very nature a co-design type of approach that, there might be changes that we would, that Holly and I would be willing to incorporate into a new version of the deck at some point. And I imagine there will be.
Awesome.
So yes.
And
Bill,
Holly?
I love that you brought up around the world. The Indigideck went in my luggage to a design lab that we did for Dow in Switzerland. And I will say cards weigh a lot. And then we instantly, like after that trip, we're like, we need a virtual version.
Yeah.
But yes, they traveled to Switzerland to an event, which was such a delight.
Super.
The only other thing that I would add is that we're blessed with this NIH-SEPA funding to really, the grant focused on community co-creation, including tribal co-creation around a gorgeous exhibit design that will be in the Missoula Public Library. And through that design process, there were two other areas that we focused in on: broader community co-creation and then also universal design. And so we'll have two more decks that are coming out, and we'll have the 3 decks through the lessons that we learned, tips, tricks, case studies, and the other 2 will probably just remain in prototyping. We're just our grant is ending, and so Indigideck may be the one that gets fully zipped up, and the rest will stay in prototyping until maybe more funding comes.
Who knows? Well, when those come to fruition in whatever format, we'll have to have you back to talk about those additional decks. Well, Holly and Bill, I just want to thank you again for sharing your expertise and information about not only the Indigideck, but more broadly working with Native communities and working with communities of all sorts, like you mentioned, Bill. So thanks again. Take care.
Thank you, Paul. This was a treat.